what I want to just introduce is really why science fiction, right? And in particular, why this subset of science fiction, which is called hard science fiction, right? So, yeah, we can show the slide later. I would rather have it in the background, but we'll do that later. So, yeah, in answering why science fiction, it's basically that we really, really need just us, people in, network state sort of space, but humanity in general really, really needs conscious design methodology to build better governance. We need some sort of process in which we can engage all the stakeholders in building the future in a dialogue, and then we need a design methodology which engages them, which we can turn that dialogue into law, into the governance structures, into the institutions that we design, right? So what on earth could be that design process? I mean, because it can get extremely technical and also extremely boring. If you want to engage people in legal debates about clause 24 in this particular line of constitution, or if you want people to look at how the software, the code, or the smart contracts, whatever that element, it can get very, very philosophical, technical, and you tend to, in politics or in software development, just get a certain type of mind, a certain type of person, a geek basically, whether it be a political geek or a software geek or a future geek, debating that. So that's not a methodology. They have their own processes and their tools with regard to designing things, but that's not a methodology that we have to hand if we adopt one of their toolkits, in which we can have conversations or dialogues with a wider community and say, hey, is that what you want to build? Or what are the values that you want to design or put into this, right? So why science fiction? Science fiction hits the mark, if you like, in terms of a good starting point for a design methodology, because first of all, it's easy to engage people. I mean, we can use all that amazing toolkit, whether it's just a good science fiction textbook, or whether it's a full-featured movie, or whether it's an immersive game or environment. That science fiction toolkit is one where it's easy to engage anyone, from children to adults to politicians to scientists to geeks. We can use that human-centered storytelling to engage people. And secondly, it's a design space which is imaginative, and not just imaginative, but playful. It's a play space. And one thing that I know from running workshops with communities or with coders or with lawyers or with activists, as soon as you get very hardcore in terms of the pressing political needs or the financial needs or what have you, people start to get very defensive. They break into tribes, they fight each other, and it's quite difficult for them to imagine new structures and new things. So science fiction gives us a play space in which we can imagine that future. We can get out of our present reality, and we can really start to smile, play, hack, and test things that we're maybe not quite sure of. And one thing we are completely sure of is that our present day institutions are totally and utterly fucked. I mean, they're medieval, basically. And if we're going to solve or address future problems or present day problems, whether that be conflict, whether that be war, whether that be the way the economy works, the democracy works, whether that be any of this shit, climate change, we need better structures for human beings to come together and bring into reality through their agreed decision-making process solutions which address those systemic problems. And we don't have those structures at the moment. So opening up that imaginative, playful design space is a prerequisite for a methodology which lets human beings, mankind, come together consciously to design that future. And lastly, we then need to do something new to that. It's not good enough to just, I don't know, make a movie, make, Matrix 2 or something like that. I mean, that's entertainment. We're not talking about just pure entertainment here. We're talking about using that technology as a storytelling technology and a participatory technology to imagine and design that future. But we need to turn that story from a script, from the story, into actual a design specification for institutions and for law. So a law, by that I mean not just the law we have now, but the future law, the future digital smart contract enabled open source democratic language that we as a species on this planet can design the human-centered agreements that we need to make effective change in this world. So that future law is basically some sort of script. And before we can get that code, that future law written down and agreed, we need to turn our storytelling imagination into a specification, which is a script, which we can read and we can understand in our native languages. And we need to workshop that script, and then we need to turn it into code. We need to turn that into the law that creates our future network state digital institutions. So why science fiction is it opens up the possibility, if we turn it into a conscious design methodology, for us to engage a wide group of stakeholders in an imaginative, playful, deliberative experience which enables and empowers them to design that future code that we need to create together. And it breaks down that barrier between the elite professionals, whether they be lawyers or smart contract coders, and the wider population that want to basically say, hey, no, I don't want that. I believe that it should be a bit more like that. And because if we had that set of rules, we would have a better outcome because of this. And you need a process in which that input that comes from stakeholders, from the wider society, is directly and as directly as possible informing the final design of what is eventually coded, because that's a slow and an expensive process to turn that deliberation into code. So why science fiction? It's one, to engage wider stakeholders, two, to open up an imaginative play space, and three, through the script or the story, we can actually see, and that'll be something that I could talk about if you ask questions about it, or we can workshop more in detail, what the specific mechanisms for turning that story into code is. You can talk about that from the startup context, where you have personas and user journeys, turning that to a design in code. You can also take that from a theatre point of view, where there are various interactive workshops where you can use storytelling and participation and engagement, and turning that into a play and actually into legislation. There's a practice in that. So you can go from practices that architects use to work with communities, again, to take the storytelling into a structural specification of what needs to be built, or you can actually go into the process of legal design charrettes, where lawyers work with communities to design law. There's now quite a wide range of playful techniques, workshop techniques, some of them very straight-laced, academic, formal, and some of them very participatory, playful, and creative, which lets you take a story or a script into code, smart contracts law. And so I'm going to pause there and just pause that about science fiction. The other thing I'd say about science fiction, just before pausing, is it's got a pedigree. It's got a history of ideas before they actually get turned into reality. And if we now look at a lot of our science fiction movies that were scripted, written 100 years, 50 years, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years ago, we can now see much of that technology, much of that reality in our real world now as digital products, technologies which are impacting us, whether that be from AI robotics, whether that be genetic manipulation and what have you. And previously, this wasn't a conscious process. This was just a way of entertaining people with a story, right? But now we're being faced with this challenge of extremely powerful technology coming down the pipe and hitting us without us consciously designing, planning, or preparing for it. So the fact that science fiction has already got that really good pedigree of predicting and in some ways inspiring the makers of products of the future to create that science fiction, to realize it already has that pedigree. So how could we take that to the next level to make it something that we can really do at scale, really do consciously, and design a better future using that methodology? And I know of no single better way of doing that than using science fiction in the design process. So over to you, Ray.
Yeah.
Maybe anyone any questions? It is interactive is more fun. You can ask, you can say rubbish, or how about this? You can interject, you can have your own thought, your idea in it. But honestly, the more you ask and the more you interact, the more fun it will be for all of us.
Maybe we can, there's a question.
I just scared everyone. Everyone's cameras got turned off as soon as I said that. No. Okay.
Oh, no, this is more of a comment. So what I'm trying to say is the ideas you have expressed are not completely unfamiliar to me, just because I've seen some other folks talking about not the exact ideas with respect to science fiction inspiration, although that is very important. Yeah, I guess I'm just saying that we are not alone. I mean, I know we know we're not, but it's good to learn about more thinking the same things, you know.
Have you got any people in mind that you're thinking of, and how would we? What for me is really important is to have a framing, like Ray said, where we're not too opinionated, but we can welcome collaborations in order to scale it up, because I'm tired of doing these little art events or these little hackathons or these little apps or these little talks or these tweets. I really feel that if we can get the sort of teamwork that you see at the end of a movie, you know, where all the credits scroll down, then it's about 300 people that have worked on this bloody bit of entertainment. If we could get that number of people working on a design process around the network state, working on it. I mean, a movie classically takes about, I think, on average, 7 years from initial idea to the realization of it, right? And it's a significant budget, you know, $100-200 million, something like that put into it. And the number of people working on that movie is phenomenal. If we could put that same amount of effort, instead of into just a piece of entertainment, into something that we could build and use in our communities and societies, but use all that tooling, that's what I think we should be aiming for. And that really takes teamwork. So have you got any thoughts on who would be interesting to invite, or the problems of working with other people in this space instead of everyone doing their own kind of little project somewhere?
Yeah. So I can think of a couple of people. The people specifically that I was talking about with respect to governance as code, I'm going to go back to WordPress and double check names exactly. But I am actually working with some folks that I met also in the past on a network states related project. So it's called the Society. It's spelled with a 3 in the middle instead of E. We're still pre-launch, but we're basically working on a system that right now it's starting as a business collaboration platform. It's a very high trust system in which people are brought in, invite only to work either as laborers to do jobs on this platform, or by people bringing in business that requires labor from folks who are based anywhere in the world, as long as they're trusted within this platform. So that's kind of the start of what we're building. And what we're hoping to do in the future is to use some of these modern blockchain technologies to automate more of the trust component. I can put folks in touch with the guy who runs the company. I don't know yet if how much we can collaborate right this moment, but I'm here for myself, just out of interest.
And just to say, another aspect of this application of science fiction as a collaborative design methodology is what we can do is do some really interesting things structurally and financially with regard to the film production process. So what's been happening in film production over, let's say, the last 15 years is instead of it being, a small team, particularly if you're talking about what's happened with streaming movies and series, Netflix type operations, is you now have groups of scriptwriters, teams, I've forgotten what they call it, something room, of up to, let's say, 15 people working on the script on each episode, and it changing, directors changing. So it's become much more collaborative and team orientated in terms of the generation of the scripts, right? You've also got the possibility of, so we're talking about future film finance, so creating new ways of financing the film production. So that's immediately taking us into DAO, blockchain, and network state territory. We can create new forms of film company. So with the science fiction process that we're talking about here at Future State, we want every person who works on it, who collaborates, who turns up at workshops, who turns up at events, who suggests ideas, right, to be a mutual co-owner. And the legal entity and the IP around the script will be co-owned to the extent that you contribute or don't contribute. And in the way in which we structure that entity, we'll be engaging with all stakeholders. And so how should we spread finance? How should we decide who is directing this scene or which text contributions get in? And how should we distribute the finance? Let's say if we raise an indie film sci-fi budget of around 15 million, how should that money go to the people producing it or the investors and other people? And that topic in itself is a microcosm of what a network state is. How does money work? How does decision-making work? How does creativity work? How do the different teamworks and the companies that are doing different aspects come together and work together? And that's a nice petri dish of literally, as they say, eating your own dog food. So again, as a design process, we can start to apply network state principles to the future creative collaborative process. And we can actually operationalize a lot of that in the way we work in co-creating the script, shooting the film, and particularly in the age of AI now, all sorts of new affordances, new opportunities for how we can reduce the cost of that production. We can use AI in the script writing process, which is what we'll be introducing at a network state, but we can also obviously collaborate and use that in the realization of either sci-fi, immersive sci-fi renditions of previews of the final screen, final scenes, which then can be acted out by actors, or we could go full down the AI route and use time process to use AI-generated scenes, stitch that together to make the feature movie, right? So that whole process of financing, structuring, collaboration, and then generation of the resultant videos is being completely transformed at the moment in the creative industry space. And us doing this project with not really the pure ambition of making the movie, but using that movie making to create the design, the experimental design process that informs the creation of the network state, and at the same time being able to access the relationship that we're able to do through the creation of that kind of media, at that kind of quality. We hit a number of buttons on the head. We get the high quality immersive visualization of that future that we can then debate and discuss and elaborate. We get the ability to crowdfund and secure mass collaboration and to preview and ground the script in the reality and the consciousness of people from a wide range of input. And we're then able to feed that back into the iterative script writing design process.
We will definitely talk more about how we see this collaboration and how we see this IP tracking also on this event a little bit later and next events, because we're working on this quite hard. But maybe we can go to some one.
And say something briefly on that, because you brought it up. IP tracking, intellectual property, how that works. Well, one particular aspect of that is we're basing the first script on a collaboration with Plurality. Plurality is Audrey Tang's text, which is released under a Gov4Git protocol of forking and tracking and then merging back in. It's an interesting take on a blockchain protocol, consensus protocol, that we can use in that deliberative process. But by adding this science fiction element, we can add the whole storytelling to that process. And then we can say exactly what the different contributions people made. And then we can use that in that kind of IP, NFT, network state, blockchain tracking of differential input. We can attach that to the business model so it's transparent who gets paid what. But basically, we're already starting with this material and that methodology in the script writing process. So one other thing, I didn't mention, hard science fiction. We didn't talk about that, did we? Do you want to talk about what hard science fiction is, Ray?
Actually, I wanted to put on mind people about Hitchhiker Guide, and talk they're part of our event and their contribution to our event as an IP and how we should work with them. Maybe.
Do you want to show any slides and I can talk about that if you want?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yep.
So, Hitchhiker's Guide is a whole kind of universe or a series of guides created by Douglas Adams. I knew Douglas a little bit. He's no longer with us. But my partner on this, Robbie Stam, was a very good friend of Douglas, and they set up Digital Village, and he's the current rights holder for this world in terms of the characters, the stories, the design, as applied to taking real-world action. So it's how can we take this world of these science fiction characters and use it in this backcasting methodology, in this script writing participatory design methodology, where we can workshop and imagine together the future that we want to design. And we can use all the characters in this world in that process. And many of the themes in this world are network state themes. They're basically a humorous, playful take, absurdist take on the state of the world, right? So in particular, there are a couple of few things in this world that are interesting to play with. So one, the idea of guides. So it's Hitchhiker's Guide. It was literally originally inspired by the early participatory guides that were published, Hitchhiker's Guide to Wales or to Europe or to South America or what have you, that were being published. And so the inspiration was, what about a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? And in that guide, in the movie, in the film, in the science fiction script, a guide was basically kind of Wikipedia to the galaxy. And a hard science fiction is a science fiction script in which everything that is in the science fiction script, apart from one absurdist proposition, is based on reality, a real science. So when you read a hard science fiction novel, it's a bit like having a Hitchhiker's Guide in the back of the book, or the back of the interaction that you have, where when you come across a spaceship, you can look up what technologies the engine is using, or you come across a particular way that the governance of the parliament works. You can look at the history of that, or you can look at the etymology of that word, or you can look at the mathematics behind the voting algorithm, or you can look up all this stuff in the guide. So by working with the Hitchhiker's Guide, which is also a really fascinating, dedicated community of people playing with these science fiction characters and this idea of real-world guidance, prior to, if you like, the commercialization of the internet, we want to go back to that idea and engage communities around writing and creating these guides. And so the first one is, or in fact also the last book or series of talks that Douglas Adams gave was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Future. So in terms of future state, that's where we want to start. And it's like, how can we engage people into the future? We've got a movie clip, but we were debating about whether to show you it, about one of the most famous things about this book or this science fiction thing, which is very well loved by geeks around the world, if you like, which is, no, we won't show it, but should we show it? What do you reckon, Ray? Yes, no?
Video clip?
Yeah, maybe not. Okay. I mean, it's up to you. It's just nice to show the actual clip from the movie, which is basically the kind of the core joke, if you like, in this science fiction universe, is that the answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42. So this computer spends 7 million years crunching away all the data to answer this, and then it says the answer is 42, and everyone kind of pulls out their hair and says, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well, basically, you didn't specify the question." Then in the movie, the society in the future decides to do what the computer says, which is build an even better simulation to figure out what the question to which the answer 42 is, and that supercomputer is actually Earth. And Earth is the biological computer entity, if you like, merging AI and biology and everything to come up with phrasing what the fundamental question is to what the answer is. And in this process, what we can do is we can take that number 42. Where's I'm trying to remember your name, 144. It's I can't see, but the number 42 turns out to be the minimal viable, the minimal effective, the minimal true size of a deliberative assembly, a citizens' assembly that you can create and that's statistically valid. So in governance terms, we're basically saying the answer to anything that you might want to pose is to come up with a diverse, neurodiverse, skill diverse, age, sex diverse group of stakeholders, and give them all the knowledge and information that they want from the internet, from Wikipedia, from science, from the future, from knowledge, from AI, inform that group of 42 people, and then start to chain and put all these different deliberations together. So that methodology of, let's say, if we're talking about how we write the script together, how we explore the hard science fiction, how we look at the form of money, the form of governance, the form of deliberation, the form of engagement that we want in the future of Ukraine, or the future of Belarus, or the future of the United Nations, or the future of Lewisham, which is a borough of London, whatever it is, or the future of universities or schools, then that deliberative process, the answer is 42. So how can we pop up and design easy to use, create fun, playful assemblies of 42 people that are provably based in the place and in the situated context that is required for that debate? You need to be coming from London, or you need to be coming from Ukraine, or you need to be genuinely a young person, or you need to be a scientist with a certain level of experience. How do we bring that together in these new forms of assembly in which we can use things like zero knowledge proofs in which we can use technology, in which we can use design to form those assemblies. And how can we then pose questions to them? And one way of posing questions to them is getting that community to imagine future scenarios, future scenes, and then challenging the experts, and then feeding that back in an iterative design loop where we say, okay, if we change the laws or the rules here, then see this would happen in the scene. And then people deliberate that and say, no, I actually think people would react like this. And when you do that, you start to play in these iterative design groups round 42, around the answer to life, the universe, and everything. You also have in that universe translation. You have the Babel fish, which you stick into your ear, and it can translate any language into any other language. So when you want to get participatory engagement and you want to work with people in Ukraine, you want to be able to hold those conversations in Ukrainian. When you want to do it in Welsh, you want to be able to hold these conversations in any language that the human species knows. You also want to be able to bring in non-human actors. You want to bring into the deliberation like the voices of nature. You want to bring the consideration of ecosystems, of planetary limits. So you want to bring that into the deliberative process. And so thinking science fiction, how do you give those things voice? Thinking science fiction, how do you give them legal decision-making power? Thinking practical reality, when we do those workshops, how do we actually do that this year? And how do we take that deliberation of a vision of where we want to get in the future, where we are now, and the steps in between? And that's this backcasting methodology, which maybe we can talk about a bit later. But with Hitchhiker's Guide, we have that IP, we have that playfulness, we have that ability to reach out to people who love that book and love that community, and we can start working with it to imagine and co-create this deliberative science fiction inspired community that is using that sci-fi backcasting methodology to prototype and design the future that we want to consciously design and then build. What else to say about 42 and the Babel fish and AI? So one thing that we will be using, and one of the big challenges for us to think about in terms of existential risk or the ability to supercharge our scientific processes or interfere or augment our democratic processes, is generative AI and that rapidly expanding technology. How's that going to impact us as humans? How are we going to collaborate with it? So that's clearly got to be in the script. That's got to be in the science fiction. And one way to do that is to use generative AI in the dialogue loop, in the design process. So we're working with a company that spent 2 years scripting. It's called Script Helper at the moment. I want to call it Fish, but that's another thing. 2 years sort of film Script Helper, right? I just like fish. One of the jokes in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is so long and thanks for all the fish. But that's another thing. And there's a nice domain .fish. So I just really like this. It's funny. It's fun. It's playful, right? But this software, they've just recently, 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, they decided to open source it. So we'll have the opportunity to open source that generative AI script writing software to use in the collaborative process of writing the script. In 2.5 hours, you can create, just as an individual, a really quite impressive science fiction script. And how you can use that in a group process online, or how you can use that in workshops and in the conference setting itself to generate not just the overall script, but a particular scene that you want to picture. So what if we had zero knowledge proof and this? What's the danger there in terms of terrorism or child pornography? Let's imagine this scene. Okay, what's the scene? Blah, blah, blah. You get back a script of a detailed scene with some characters that you've already done. And then you debate that and you say, oh, no, I don't think it would work like that. I think this would happen in that scene. And you get immediate feedback in that creative process, so that just by in a generative workshop that is a design challenge. That's the thing we have to design. With online participants and AI, we start to generate that iterative design loop and come up with a fantastic script for a science fiction script, which at the same time becomes a specification for the code that we need to build. And I can go on about that. That's a bit nerdy, and we'll get to that. But I think you can see that the use of AI in both the storytelling, the script itself, and as a technology that we have to play with is really important. And one of the characters in Hitchhikers is Marvin. He's the manic depressive robot who's incredibly, he's got the brain the size of a planet, and he's kind of just chronically depressed all the time, right? About how, so we can play with these characters in the process that we're talking about. So that Hitchhiker.
Yeah, I can just for example, ground it from my personal experience, and I believe Maxim also here, he is also Belarusian, and because we have this diaspora right now in Europe, in the world itself, and we have so fucking many possibilities to do something, and right now our democratic force is a little bit stuck. And trying to make the same stuff that all other democracy trying to do already like for 100 years. But we don't have the same resources, we don't have and the same possibilities as in them. That is why trying to put our minds outside of the box and thinking in a more creative way, in a more interesting way. And it's really necessary what our diaspora need to do right now. It's also really cool to have something that already established. We wouldn't be talking about Hitchhiker guy. It is a whole galaxy. It's already like 6 books, I believe, that already wrote about this. Because one of the main parts of writing stuff and thinking about something is to create this new network of individuals and stuff and jokes like fish, like everything to make something on top of that. But it's already like a written book. It's already hard science fiction because it's making something that we are thinking about and what people right now inventing right now. And that is why it's just easy to put something on already existing world and collaborate on that. And that's why we really appreciate what Hitchhiker IP is doing. So basically, we have this IP. We have this IP, first of all, on the Congress, where we can cooperate in that. And after that, so Hitchhiker Guide to the Future is basically, it's a next series of this IP that we are creating together with you, with other diasporas, with other people. And basically, you can collaborate with that. It's like... it's not something small, or it's a book that already had a number of films that was commercially successful. It's a book that already was right now is one of the loveliest book of Elon Musk, for example. He mentioned this book at least in 2 his last interviews. So it's something huge that you can collaborate with. It's something that you can be a part of with, and we will love you to be as this part.
And just to say, the aim of the IP rights holders at the moment, it's a company called Don't Panic Limited. Don't panic is another of the Hitchhiker's catchphrases. The aim is to transfer that IP into this project, into a commons, right, that would be owned by all of us, to the benefit of blah, 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 done, right? So the aim is for us in this process to constitute a new network state for this universe of creatives, right? To write that script, and we have to create this way in which those right holders want us to create a new form of commons, like a new form of Creative Commons, and incentivize Creative Commons that can kind of get better and grow and pay for itself. So, with all that kind of crypto economic thing, but also which can't be sold out. It can't just be sold out to a big multinational company. It will forever be owned by the participants, humanity. We can view that as therefore a universe in which that IP isn't just used as a fan site to just reenact those characters, but that universe is used to create new IP, new characters, new stories, new guides. So you can view every guide that could be published in this universe, right, as its own story, its own new piece of IP, and in fact as a DAO, a community that you can join in order to take real-world action, to change something. It might be just to change your community, your life. You might want to create a documentary. You might want to do something. So the universe that we're talking about in terms of picturing a future society, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Future as a starting point, is a piece of IP that gives you the freedom to bring your own ideas to it and to incubate those and create those. So it's not just about worshipping that existing world and reenacting it. It's using those characters as like mentors, inspiration, a play space for you to create your own characters, your own stories, and to realize those in the world.
Maybe we can speak just a little bit about backcasting and how we will use it on Congress. Because it's one of the main parts what we're using as a method on the Congress and why we also call it future state, and why we're starting from the future, not just from this point.
Okay, we've got a slide, but we don't need the slide. So, all right. So, backcasting is a quite well known, little bit niche, if you like. It's become a little bit more popular recently in terms of a writing strategy, if you like, for these kinds of science fiction. It's also something that has a background in participatory theatre, and it also has relevance and a background to scenario planning and used in companies and a sort of workshopping sense. And it, as this sort of slide, if you like, shows, the first bit is the bit we've been talking about imagining the future. So you start by imagining the future that you want to build, right? You also might imagine other aspects of that future, like dystopian aspects of that future, potential problems with that future. But you start with that. You start imagining the future, right? And then you describe it. You literally write the script. Now you can do that with personas and user journeys. You can talk about scenes, but you imagine that future. And then what you want to do is jump all the way back to the present, right? You back to so after you've kind of workshopped that future, you want to jump back. You want to ground that future in the present. So you want to talk about what technologies, what communities, what energies, what budgets. That's a kind of documentary genre. It's like document the present. What do you have? What resources do you have? And then you write a series of steps or scenes. It's a bit like time travel from that present to the future that you've imagined. And that whole journey, which you can also branch out, you can have some setbacks and some disasters, some revolutions and things like that on that journey, is basically this backcasting loop, right? Imagine the future, ground yourself in the present, and then come up with a realistic series of steps from the present that takes you to that future. Imagining various alternative realities or scenarios that might happen at various stages in that journey. And then when you have that whole story, if you like, you can then get creative about how you tell it. Do you start in the present? Do you start in the future? Do you jump back? Do you move around in various places? And you can kind of cherry pick that world that you've created to create the particular story that you're interested in. And out of that world, you can have multiple stories, right? So you can see this, if you look at it on the screen here, as kind of like a Terminator kind of movie. So you've got this kind of dystopian future. Classically in science fiction, it's more fun to tell the dystopian story, right? But with a kind of multiverse type take, you can look at that future from the kind of utopian and dystopian and indeed other perspectives, and then that gives you a more robust set of stories from which to plan a realistic path from here to the future you consciously want to design. But basically, you've got the time travel back to the present. Can we actually work with this real project, this real community in Ukraine, this city that we are building, and can we see how that goes, and then picture that in the future, this particular scientist or this particular coder who's in the present. We can take that reality and that documentary footage, and specifically we're taking some of the reality we've got in terms of the reality of what we've got in terms of network state technology, the code bases we have, the open source projects we have, the communities that are working on it, the eco-villages, the pop-up cities, that whole movement. And we're saying, what's the future of that movement? And then how do we get from that present and we can work with documentary footage in this storytelling, right? So we can actually document real, so we've got some rights to a certain amount of documentary footage, which we can put into the final world, the science fiction world. And so this backcasting methodology is something that we can play with in terms of workshops with communities, enacting conferences, archive workshop it, and use that to inform the final script, which we then shoot or turn into a game.
Yeah, so it is what we're using for just imagine this future, and we're talking about a particular, very grounded, understandable project that we want to put on that. For example, we mentioned a city in Ukraine. So we basically want to imagine how this future of new city of Ukraine should look like. We're talking about Belarusian diaspora. So basically we need to understand how and imagine how this Belarusian diaspora can be, I don't know, conquer all over the world and became a disparate nation that conquer even Mars and the other galaxies. We can imagine. We are also talking about government space committee, so making it even closer to the future. And we're working with a real space scientist, and basically he is a director of Cyprus Space Organization. And right now we are working on creating space government committee and put it on real other organizations that are working with space. So it's right now we're talking about tens of people, we're talking about hundreds of people, and in the future it will be thousands of people who are going to space to live on it, on spaceships, on other planets like Mars, or what Elon Musk basically is doing, or other galaxies in next decades, or I don't know when. And we need to also understand how it can be done in the future, and how we can use it right now.
For instance, lawyers and space lawyers, that's the sort of place where even they are expressing an interest in using this science fiction and this backcasting methodology to imagine the future problems that can occur in space, right? Before it's built, before the colonies are built, what would property be? All those sorts of things. And engaging multiple stakeholders in that debate, that's a real thing that real communities now in space, in science, in space exploration, want to run those workshops, want to design using these sorts of techniques, right? And if we're talking about smaller sort of and still very ambitious projects like building a regenerative city in Ukraine, where we look at the actual land, there are problems like, does the community really want it? Do they believe it's even possible? Is there pushback from them? How do you persuade the local councillor or get the right legislation? All those problems, that's kind of documentary style. Then you have to write, how do we overcome those problems to actually build the city in the first place? And what are the barriers that we need to overcome? And that whole story becomes really human, becomes really important, practically speaking, if you want to realize that project. But it's also great storytelling. And what the lessons there don't just apply to Ukraine, but they apply all over the world. So starting to reach out to those other communities, working on that, getting that support is part of the design process. We'll have a recording of it, and we'll link that from the Discord as well. I would like to talk, but maybe not right now, about the archive, the Anarchive as we call it, and how that works, so that all these recordings and all these conversations form part of the audit trail of the ideas and the contribution, and so everyone gets accreditation from that. But also I think it's hugely important for society to start storing serious, imaginative design debates about our future, concerns people have, ideas people have. There is no single place you can go to look at the different perspectives, the different thoughts, the different ideas people have around these design issues. So we want to use that in our methodology and create a new form of archive for that we're calling the Anarchive. I want to say one other thing to get a little bit more, because I'm well aware that when you start talking about space or space law or movies or these things, it can sound very ambitious, crazy, and outside the grounded reality of where we are here and now. So I want to talk a little bit about a way of seeing the same story, but in very grounded ways. So if you're talking about just a design process for a plot of land that you have for a community space, but in Ukraine, we're talking about quite a large plot of land to build a city. When you do that, I don't know, it's not common knowledge unless you've actually engaged in it yourself, either at the community level or in architecture. There are ways in which you do design workshops with the community. So I've been involved in that quite a lot. I mean, from a long time ago, it used to be called, here in the UK, Planning for Real, which was a way of doing a workshop with the community where you show some sketches, you start doing models with like toilet rolls, and you do these funny, very basic workshops with the community. That went on to be talking about design charrettes. For some reason, they use this French word. But that way you might start to engage the architects with three-dimensional models. You play and you experiment and you imagine the future that way. In the age that we're moving into now, that participatory practice of designing a park or a housing block or an area of the city or a redesign of the city or designing whole new eco-cities or regenerative cities, in the age of AI, the technology that we have now to visualize that future, to take design changes and iterate it, that's the sort of world where in real world planning scenarios now, still not quite brought to reality, that form of exercise, that form of participatory workshop, that citizen assembly around those design issues is just commonplace real world practice in that design process. And so working with architects, working with companies, working with 3D models, working with AI, we're able to run those kind of present but cutting edge workshops with these sorts of communities. And when you start to bring the filmmaking in, you're basically just visualizing those 3D models and the way in which communities interact with those. And that is now a really standard practice for anything which you would call urban design, right? So we're able to bring those companies and those tool sets to this project because we're going to focus on real areas of actual land that there's the ability and the finance to build on that, right? So there is a plot of land in Ukraine, but there is also some land in UK, and there's some land in America, and there are other project partners that have land that would like to engage communities in that design process. So that's very grounded, very established practice. We can take that to a more playful and next level because, classically speaking, you don't get you get the sort of local councillors and the architects and some business and like 20 people from the community turning up. If we can really turn it into something which is really playful, really fun, really imaginative, that you can run in schools, that you can pop up and that people really want to come to, and they really feel that their decisions attract and they're deciding what's going to be built, that is a very powerful technology in which we are taking the network state imagination of future institutions, future governance, future cities, and turning it into something real.
So we already have a couple of studios and a couple of partners that will be acting as embassies and trying to help us. For example, David is from London, and we're talking about Royal Societies of Art. is quite a huge community of people who are interested in this. If we're talking about a particular Ukrainian project, we're talking about Button Studios. It's a New York studio and that already helped to design projects for Ukraine and rebuild Ukraine. And we are really will be much more of that just in the near future. But we already have like 15 minutes. Maybe we can setting up the scene. We already talked a little bit about our event. We already talked a little bit about hard science fiction and involvement of Hitchhiker guide. Really very open to everything you're thinking about, and really helpful if you can ask any questions and we can participate on that.
The scary side.
Always.
It's always crappy to go on the spot, but
it's Arvin. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. I was I had to fix my audio settings. I just want to say I did miss I said that I needed to step away for a little bit. I did miss part of the later part of the discussion, but I'm definitely interested in learning more about the Discord, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to share these ideas with all of us.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you as well.
I wonder if it's worth asking about, maybe I can be cheeky and ask someone here. I want to ask, but I don't know, did she leave? What's her name again? 144,000.
Natalia.
Natalia. I want to ask Natalia something if you still exist here. Natalia, calling Natalia, are you here? No, not necessarily. Yes, no. I think she's gone. So I'm going to pick on you, Alicia. What I'm really interested in is making it as participatory as possible and giving space for people to sort of say, hey, I'd like to get involved to do this, or I'd like to volunteer on doing this. And in any of these spaces, we're going to create these kind of circles in which that participation can be attributed. You can become a co-owner of the project and what have you. And from what we've talked about so far, can you think of anything that it might be interesting for you to design or make or learn? And can you think of any other people that you know that might have a similar thing? So if even at this very early stage, can you think of something? I might be able to contribute like this, or this is something I would like to learn and get good at in this community. What ideas might you have along that?
Ideas on how I might contribute, right? Am I hearing it right? Because it was quite a long question. Okay, so yeah, for sure. Like as a part of my work, I do lots of interviews with people. So any kind of work that requires communicating with people and conducting interviews, I think that would be very interesting to me. And I think I will be very helpful in this sphere. Like Ray mentioned, the Budova project that is going on in Ukraine. And I thought about talking about people who lost their homes, for example, and who might be interested in living in these cities, because we know like so little about them and their needs. And it would be super interesting to talk to them and find out what they actually need, maybe like conduct some workshops with them so they would be able to build their cities for themselves, you know? And it's something that is close to my heart. So this is what I'm really, really interested in volunteering and participating in.
So yeah, it's basically open call for everybody to contribute with their passion about, or making this bazaar of knowledge experiences that can help each other. It was our first event. We talked about sci-fi fiction and some stuff. Our next event will be next week. We will bring more people from our team. Firstly, it's Kyriakos Asani. He basically working on a Cyprus investment organization. It's kind of government organization that are helping project with investment and also investing some money. So if you have project, it also can be part of that. But basically, he's very passionate about network state, pop-up cities, and he trying to put this agenda to a Cyprus community and Cyprus governments. Basically, he can catch everybody on Cyprus to the president level. And that is why we're also making this on Cyprus, because it's very helpful for that. And that is why we're making on Cyprus, because this community is very open for all these kind of experiences. They very open to making special economic zones or virtual economic zones, to making this part of what they can do. Because Cyprus is basically European Union country and have so much power on that. And yeah, it will be next event where we will talk with Kyriakos. We will talk about the venue, the region itself, and the governments, and how Cyprus looking on this network state stuff. And
so it's also got great history. So you know, Greece overall and Cyprus in particular has some ancient history to do with the first, or some of the very early, interesting, and for us even quite revolutionary governance and democratic models, right? Cyprus is also sitting right there on the border of sort of Europe and North Africa, the Middle East conflict. It's got the conflict between Greek and Turkish Cypriots, disputes over land, dispute resolution, and looking at that issue is very, very relevant as well to thinking how we can solve that ownership and that collaboration around the development of land there. So the whole story of Cyprus, why we're doing this event in Cyprus, and that conversation with government and the network state, we can really start to bring that to the fore at the next event, just in a little lightweight way. But why Cyprus is very interesting.
Thank you everybody for coming to this call. We just started, and I see you next week.